Overview of the Great Migration. Definition and context. The Great Migration refers to the mass movement of Black Americans from the rural South to urban areas in the North and West during the early to mid-20th century. This migration occurred in two main waves, 1910, 1940, and 1940-1970, significantly altering the demographic landscape of the United States. In 1910, approximately 90% of Black Americans lived in the South, primarily due to the historical context of slavery and post-emancipation settlement patterns. By 1940, around 1.5 million Black Americans had migrated, reducing the Southern Black population to 77%, and by 1970, it further decreased to 52%. Major cities that attracted migrants included Chicago, Detroit, Pittsburgh, and New York City, with many families also moving to the West Coast, particularly Los Angeles. The migration was driven by a combination of push factors, economic hardship, violence, and pull factors, job opportunities, better living conditions. Push factors for migration. The oppressive system of sharecropping kept many Black Americans in a cycle of poverty and debt, making it difficult to achieve economic stability. Sharecropping involved landowners providing resources on credit, leading to perpetual indebtedness for workers, often exacerbated by high interest rates and poor harvests. Laws prevented sharecroppers from leaving if they were in debt, contributing to a form of economic slavery that limited mobility and freedom. The threat of violence from groups like the Ku Klux Klan created an atmosphere of terror, prompting many to seek safety and security elsewhere. Jim Crow laws institutionalized racial segregation, denying Black Americans access to quality education, healthcare, and economic opportunities, further motivating migration. The desire for a better quality of life and the hope for economic mobility were significant motivators for many families. Pull factors for migration. The industrial boom in the North created a demand for labor, particularly in sectors like automotive, meatpacking, and steel industries, offering higher wages than in the South. Reports of better job opportunities and living conditions in northern cities attracted many Black Americans seeking to escape poverty. For example, Black men could earn up to $5 a day in the North compared to just 75 cents a day in the South, making migration financially appealing. The establishment of vibrant Black communities in northern cities provided social support networks for new migrants, easing the transition. Cultural movements, such as the Harlem Renaissance, flourished in northern cities, offering artistic and social opportunities that were less accessible in the South. The promise of civil rights and greater political participation in the North also served as a significant pull factor. Economic impact of the Great Migration. Sharecropping system. Sharecropping emerged as a dominant agricultural system in the South post-Civil War, where landowners provided land and resources to workers in exchange for a share of the crops. This system often resulted in exploitative practices, where landowners manipulated agreements to keep sharecroppers in debt, creating a cycle of poverty. The economic instability caused by sharecropping pushed many Black Americans to seek better opportunities in the North, where industrial jobs promised more reliable income. Boll weevil infestation and unpredictable weather further diminished the viability of farming for many Black families, making migration more appealing. Sharecropping laws often included punitive measures that could imprison workers for debts, contributing to the racialized prison industrial complex. The transition from sharecropping to urban industrial work marked a significant shift in the economic landscape for Black Americans. Job opportunities in the North. The Great Migration coincided with the rise of industrialization in the North, which created a high demand for labor in factories and manufacturing. Black migrants found work in various industries, including automotive, for example, Ford, meatpacking, for example, Chicago stockyards, and steel production, for example, Pittsburgh. The wage disparity between the South and North was stark, with many Black workers earning significantly more in industrial jobs than in agricultural roles. The influx of Black labor contributed to the economic growth of northern cities, but also led to competition and racial tensions with white workers. Labor unions often excluded Black workers, limiting their ability to advocate for better working conditions and wages, which led to the formation of separate Black labor organizations. The economic contributions of Black migrants helped shape the urban landscape and culture of northern cities. Social and cultural impact of the Great Migration. Changes in community structure. The migration led to the establishment of new Black communities in northern cities, fostering a sense of solidarity and cultural identity. These communities became centers for cultural expression, leading to movements like the Harlem Renaissance, which celebrated black art, literature, and music. The migration also resulted in demographic shifts, as cities became more diverse, leading to both cultural enrichment and racial tensions. Social networks formed among migrants helped to provide support and resources for new arrivals, easing the transition to urban life. The establishment of black-owned businesses and institutions in northern cities contributed to economic independence and community resilience. The migration experience varied widely among individuals and families, influencing their social status and opportunities in different ways. Impact of Jim Crow and racial violence. The Great Migration was partly a response to the oppressive Jim Crow laws that enforced racial segregation and discrimination in the South. Domestic terrorism, particularly from groups like the Ku Klux Klan, created an environment of fear and violence that pushed many to leave their homes. The migration highlighted the stark contrast between the oppressive conditions in the South and the relatively better opportunities in the North, despite ongoing racism. Racial violence in the North also emerged as black migrants faced discrimination and hostility from white residents, leading to race riots in cities like Chicago and Detroit. The struggle for civil rights continued in the North as migrants sought to challenge systemic racism and fight for equality. The legacy of Great Migration continues to influence contemporary discussions about race, identity, and social justice in America. Historical context of black communities in the South. Conditions of black communities. Many black communities were left in dilapidated and poor conditions due to systemic racism and neglect. Segregation laws enforced separation in public spaces, including water, fountains, hospitals, and cemeteries, illustrating the pervasive nature of racism. The impact of these conditions was not only physical but also psychological, as black individuals faced constant reminders of their second-class status. Systematic disenfranchisement. Southern states employed literacy tests, poll taxes, and property requirements to suppress black voting rights, undermining the 14th and 15th Amendments. These measures were designed to maintain white supremacy and control over black populations, effectively eroding their political power. The violent suppression of black communities, exemplified by events like the Wilmington riots of 1898 and the Atlanta riots of 1906, further illustrated the lengths to which white supremacists would go. The Great Migration, cause and experiences. The push factors. The violence and terror inflicted by groups aiming to maintain white supremacy forced many black individuals to flee for their lives. The Great Migration is often viewed as a refugee crisis, with parallels drawn to other historical migrations due to oppression, such as those from famine or war. Isabel Wilkerson's work highlights the desperation and courage of those who left their homes in search of safety and opportunity. The pull factors. Newspapers like the Chicago Defender and informal networks provided information about better opportunities in the North, encouraging migration. Many black Southerners were motivated by the stories of those who had successfully settled in northern cities, creating a sense of hope. Despite the allure of the North, migrants often face new challenges, including poverty and continued segregation, albeit in different forms. The impact of the Great Migration. Economic opportunities and challenges. The North offered economic opportunities that were largely unavailable in the South, allowing many to improve their living conditions. However, the transition was not seamless. Many migrants encountered poverty and discrimination in urban settings. The economic infrastructure of the South relied heavily on black labor, leading to desperation among white employers as migration increased. Cultural and social transformations. The Great Migration led to the establishment of vibrant black urban communities, fostering cultural growth and artistic expression. This period produced significant contributions to American culture, including music, literature, and art. As black artists thrived in new environments, the migration also prompted the formation of benevolent societies to support new arrivals, showcasing community resilience and solidarity. Reflections on the Great Migration. A narrative of agency and resilience. The Great Migration is not merely a story of oppression but also one of black Americans asserting control over their lives and destinies. Wilkerson emphasizes the courage required to leave home, highlighting the emotional and historical ties to the land left behind. The narrative challenges traditional views by focusing on the agency of black migrants rather than solely on the forces that pushed them away. More on the Great Migration. Overview. The Great Migration occurred in the decades after the Civil War and witnessed the movement of hundreds of thousands of African Americans from the South to communities in the North and West. Historians generally talk about the Great Migration in two waves, one from 1910 to 1940 and another from 1940 to 1970, which is considered the end of the Great Migration. Between 1910 and 1940, an estimated 1.5 million African Americans migrated from the South to northern cities. Impact of the Great Migration. The first wave of the Great Migration was accompanied by a flowering of black, intellectual and artistic expression, known nationally as the Harlem or Black Renaissance. The Great Migration was an important precursor to the civil rights movement of the 1950s and 1960s, as African American civil rights leaders had to fight for full equality across the nation. Factors contributing to the Great Migration. Lack of opportunity for African Americans to make a stable living in the South. Economic inequality in the form of unfair labor practices such as sharecropping, tenant farming, and the crop-laying system compelled many African Americans to move in hopes of more equitable treatment in northern factories. Reverse migration. In recent years, scholars have documented a reverse migration from northern cities back to the South. Young people in large numbers came out and joined what became known as the Red Guards, largely terroristic organizations used to publicly humiliate, assault, and in some cases even murder political enemies of Mao and the Communist Party. Major cities in the North: Chicago, Illinois; Detroit, Michigan; Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania; New York. Other migration destinations: California, Oregon, Washington. During World War I, 454,000 black Southerners moved north during World War I. Migration after WWI. 800,000 African Americans continued to move north after WWI. Reasons for leaving the South: Jim Crow laws and lack of economic opportunity. Desirability of the North. Lack of Jim Crow laws, abundance of factory positions in cities, recruitment by Pennsylvania Railroad Company. The company offered to pay the travel expenses for people to move and work for them. Additional reasons for escaping South: lack of Jim Crow laws in the North, unfair legal system, unfair educational opportunities, denial of suffrage, support for violence, discriminatory laws in the South, Jim Crow laws, hate group in the South, the Ku Klux Klan, mass migration. Name: the Great Migration. Migration to Harlem. Many African Americans moved to Harlem in New York City, Manhattan. Number of African Americans in Harlem: 175,000 African Americans moved to Harlem. Harlem Renaissance. The Great Migration drew to Harlem some of the greatest minds and brightest talents of the day. An astonishing array of African American artists and scholars. The Harlem Renaissance encompassed poetry and prose, painting and sculpture, jazz and swing, opera and dance. Unification of diverse art forms in Harlem. Langston Hughes said, "Expression of our individual dark-skinned selves," referring to what united these diverse art forms in Harlem. End of the Harlem Renaissance. The Great Depression. Harlem Renaissance and Great Migration. Famous musical artists during the Jazz Age included Duke Ellington, Louis Armstrong, and Bessie Smith. Major factors influencing the Harlem Renaissance were the Great Migration and cultural pride. Challenges and time periods. Segregation was made legal in the South due to Jim Crow laws. The first wave of the Great Migration took place during the time period of 1910–1940. Harlem Renaissance and Great Migration connection. The Harlem Renaissance was a product of the Great Migration, as many who migrated ended up in Harlem and shared their talents such as art and music. Cultural aspects. The Harlem Renaissance popularized jazz music. The Harlem Renaissance started in the 1922nd. Minstrel shows and segregation. Blackface characters were created using materials like grease paint, shoe polish, and burned cork. Blackface was used in minstrel shows to emphasize and make fun of African American stereotypes, famous personalities, and locations. Josephine Baker was a dancer/singer during the Harlem Renaissance. The Kind Club was the white-on nightclub where famous performers of the Harlem Renaissance were allowed to perform live. Miscellaneous facts. The original name for the Harlem Renaissance was the New Negro Movement. Jim Crow laws were named after the theater actor T.D. Daddy Rice. Civil rights. First Amendment, right of the people.